Teneo CEO is with us, Chairman, of course. It is Declan Kelly. Wonderful to have some time with you, Declan. You've got the ear of CEOs. CEOs are busy calling you. You've had, of course, experience in politics as well. What do you make of these initial executive orders that we're seeing thick and fast, and just a moment ago focusing in on a federal level approach to COVID-19? What are the CEOs' reaction to it?
Good afternoon, Caroline. Thank you for having me with you again. Well, I think this is to be expected. I don't think anybody's surprised by the rate of execution that's happened here since the new administration took over. I think they signaled what they were going to do, and so the companies involved were more than ready, and I think more than supportive. I think the executive orders related to COVID are going to keep coming, and I think the different tasks that are being laid out by the administration are going to start becoming much more prevalent across multiple different sectors and companies over the next number of days and weeks. We're advising a range of different businesses who are clearly trying to do everything they can to expedite the distribution and efficacy of the vaccine and the vaccine system. And, it's one of your speakers earlier said it's all about getting enough shots in the arm as quickly as possible. And I think people will be encouraged by what they've seen over the last 48 hours in terms of the speed of response. You're also going to see a lot of companies that traditionally would not have been involved in vaccine distribution or dissemination putting their hands up and saying that they are willing to do it. And I think you're going to see the government partnering with a lot more companies that aren't even traditionally within the healthcare space over the next several weeks as the spread of the distribution gets more effective.
So, Declan, Biden did sort of make this case here, the idea of federal involvement, federal strategy for a federal crisis, national crisis, I should say. What about how this projects out to the rest of the world and the U.S.'s role in being a leader, at least its traditional role of being a leader on these types of crises? Because, after all, COVID isn't a U.S. crisis, it is a global crisis.
Yeah, no, I think it's a fair point. In the United States, obviously, the startup has been sluggish, but I think there is a growing increased optimism, certainly amongst the corporate sector, that is going to improve over the weeks and months ahead. If you look at the vast majority of earnings that will be released over the course of this earnings season, I think you're going to see a pretty common trait, which is that most CEOs are going to say the first half of the year will continue to be sluggish and tricky, and the second half of the year will be better, because they expect at that point, let's call it June, July, that a vast majority of Americans and others around the world will have gotten at least the first round of vaccines, if not both rounds. The picture isn't much prettier outside of the United States. We advise CEOs all over the world, obviously, and it's just as bad in those other markets. We obviously talked a moment ago about the UK, where it's a dire situation, although they are getting better vaccines distributed now to more people. But it's problematic everywhere. I think all governments are struggling to get this distribution right, but also the production rates that have to be achieved to get that done are clearly falling behind because the demand is so large. But over the course of the next several weeks and months, which I know is not immediate and it's not fast enough for anybody, but I do think you will see that this will improve, and I do think you'll see that most governments will get their arms around this problem.
Our global business audience would love to be a fly on the wall in some of the conversations, particularly when it comes to the future of business travel, when it comes back, what it looks like. What are you hearing from some of your CEOs about what that future looks like?
I think several of the leading CEOs who are greater experts on this than I am, like Ed Bastian of Delta, someone I greatly admire, for example, have been out over the last number of days talking about what their expectations are for travel. And as soon as, vaccines are distributed in enough numbers, I do think people are going to start traveling again in greater numbers. There's already signs out there that is the case as we begin to sort of expedite the distribution. It will take some time, there's no doubt about that, but in the second half of the year, I think there's a growing level of confidence that will continue to improve.
Declan, your political experience needed here as well. From after what happened but 2 weeks ago in terms of on Capitol Hill, we sort of thought maybe a more bipartisan approach would be upon us. But already we're getting a bit of Republican pushback, even the moderates Republicans, to the stimulus bill, the sheer size of it. From your perspective, does big business want the sort of size, the scale of stimulus that the Biden administration is discussing at the moment?
Well, first of all, I think the political dialogue is to be expected. That's what politics is all about. It's about debate, and it's about different sides having different views. So I'm not surprised by that, and I think that would continue regardless. I do think there will be, some changes in the way that all happens because of the math. in Congress at the moment. But as it relates to corporations, I think they have had very positive engagement with the incoming administration over the last 3 to 4 months since the presidential election outcome was known and determined. And, I've been part of a number of those outreaches and been involved in a number of those discussions, and they've all been very positive. I think this is going to be a lot more business-friendly administration than some predicted. I think that there has to be a serious level of engagement between the private sector and the administration and, frankly, other governments around the world. So I think after the COVID situation has been gotten under control a bit more, I think you're going to see a lot more engagement, let's call it 100 days in. Clearly, COVID is the priority right now, as it should be. Yeah. But the corporate community is fully expecting that that's going to, continue to expand, and there will be better dialogue in the months ahead.
Only a minute left, Declan, but what about global dialogue? Romain touched on it there, the sort of standing of the United States globally, but the hawkish nature that we're hearing of, unsurprisingly perhaps, from the new administration against China still. How are your CEOs reacting to that?
Look, China is going to account for 1/3 of all global growth in the world in the next 10 years. Its economy is going to grow 7.9% this year. America's is going to grow 3.5%. UK's is going to grow 3.5%. That math is pretty easy for anyone to understand. There's $150 billion of trades and services exported by the US into China in the last 12 months alone. So, the importance of this relationship between the two nations is not going to be diminished. I think the current administration will leave a lot of the current tariffs and regulations in place until there has been an opportunity for a rapprochement over the next 3 to 6 months. I do think the dialogue will be different. I think it'll be more engaging, and I think there will be more of it. But I don't expect much change in terms of the actual trading relationship between the countries, at least for the remainder of 2021.
All right, Declan, we're going to have to leave it there. Always great to get your thoughts. Great insights here from the Teneo Chairman and CEO, Declan Kelly.